Erin, I'll go ahead and introduce myself, and then you can introduce yourself. I am the current chair of the employment practice group at Forella. We are a growing group. We just made a new partner in the group, and I think Chandra is on the presentation. So there are now 3 partners, and we have 5 or 6 and growing associates. And all of us at the partner level practice exclusively employment law, and that's been my career for a couple of decades now. My practice centers on advice and counseling, and my partner Doug is more focused on litigation, and Chandra, our newest partner, does a nice mix of both. So that's a little about me and my practice. Erin?
Sure, yeah. So hi, everybody. I'm Erin Hastings and happy to be with everybody today. Usually I practice in our Seiler office right across the street from Holly in the Forella offices. And I did want to say I am grateful to be, I do miss everybody, but I am grateful to not have to brave the weather today to have this presentation. So just welcome to my living room, and hope everybody's cozy and has their space heaters on today. In our Seiler practice, we have offices all over the Bay Area, but we do have 16 staff that are dedicated to advisory and assurance with me in this group. And as part of our business intelligence services, we offer this independent compensation equity analysis that Holly and I have been developing and talking about the last maybe 18 months or so. And so in order to do that kind of analysis, we use data analytics software and assurance procedures. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that works today. This is our agenda discussion overview for today. We're going to bring you up to speed on the basics of a compensation equity analysis and the latest research and laws and best practices. And as Margaret and Holly mentioned, you can leave questions in the comment section. And if we can answer them, great. If it's a longer answer, we might table it for later. But we really would love for this to be a dynamic discussion. So happy to have you participate as much as possible. We're going to give you a general overview of what a compensation equity analysis entails. But the first thing we want to do is ground ourselves and talk about the big news, which is California's new law, SB 973, which is the pay data reporting law. So Holly's going to talk about that.
That's right. So the most pressing deadline, and a lot of us are pretty motivated by deadlines, is the upcoming deadline on March 31st under the new government code section, which applies to employers with more than 100 employees. So those employers are now required to submit a pay data report to the California DFEH, which will be familiar to all of you, I'm sure. And so one of the questions we got was, well, how do I know if I am one of the employers that is required to submit this form? And the answer is, if you have a total of 100 employees anywhere, so that's full-time and that's part-time employees, then you hit that trigger. And if you have even one California employee, then you are covered by the law. So I think most of the clients on our invite today have a pretty healthy, robust presence here in California, but it would apply to even those who have just the one remote employee here and have most of their workforce elsewhere. And I put in the slide there, and I think we're going to circulate this after the presentation. There's actually pretty helpful guidance on the DFEH website, which gives some FAQs. But the bottom line on the data reporting is that you're required to take a look at your salary info and provide it. We're going to talk in more detail about that. Provide it in a report to the state. And there's an option to choose any single pay period in basically Q4 between October 1 and December 31. And that presents employers with some flexibility and is a reason why you may want to start this process early. You may want to choose a few different pay periods to see if you have different results. And keeping in mind that for employers, especially some of our winery clients, you're going to have a different payroll in October than you're going to have in November and December. And that's true for a lot of seasonal operations. And so this is your option, and something that might be useful in terms of investing a little extra time to see what that final report is going to look like. The other aspect of the report is that you'll be dividing your workforce into 10 EEO job categories. And these will be somewhat familiar to some employers who were previously submitting the EEO reports to the EEOC under federal law. That program was discontinued under the prior administration. We're anticipating it may be eventually reactivated, but in the meantime, California went ahead with its own version, but they're relying on some of these prior federal job categories. So by way of example, there are 2 categories of senior level officials and managers at the executive and at the first and mid-level. And then below that, you have these other 8 job categories, which are divided. They're not always as intuitive as one would hope. They're fairly broad categories. And that will be part of the work of this report, is determining which of your employees go into which of these categories. Then once you've divided your employees into the categories, then we move on to the demographic information that you're required to produce, which is we're breaking down by race, ethnicity, and gender within those job categories. And there is some guidance again on race and ethnic and gender determinations. In the California form, they're going to give you 3 options on gender, non-binary being one of them, which of course is a difference from the prior forms. And again, because it's a new requirement, we're relying to some extent on the prior guidance from the EEOC on how you make those determinations. And then finally, the part that's kind of most relevant to what we're going to talk about today is then you break down by pay band. So you're looking at annualized earnings, and those are broken into 12 pay bands. They start at 19,239, which tracks to the federal minimum wage, and then tops out at 208,000 and up. So again, we're really sharing a lot of data now with the DFEH, which is broken down so that within a job category, you'll see who's in which pay band and how that breaks down by gender and ethnicity. Now, there is a lot of concern that when you start running these numbers, that they may indicate pay disparities that are attributable to other factors, and so that's why we're expecting that employers are going to want to get ahead of this and start taking a look at that data before they actually have to share it. It is just a snapshot, and we'll. I think in the next slide we talk about you are entitled to put some notes and explanation into your data. Maybe that. So as you work through it, if you're seeing signs of inequities that are attributable to certain factors, you're entitled to make that explanation. Now, this data reporting form, and we'll talk about this a little more, this is not going to be publicly available yet, but it will certainly be in your files and something that would potentially be discoverable. So we'll talk about that a little more.
Great overview of that law. We're going to keep on coming back to it, but right now we're going to take a big step back and talk about what is a compensation equity analysis, regardless of the new reporting requirements, just looking at, okay, what does a comp equity analysis actually entail? And I want to just make a note really quick about what we call it. You'll hear me use the term compensation equity analysis, which is a mouthful, but I, have been an auditor for 20 years. And so I'm a little sensitive to using the term pay equity audit because there really are no standards that have been set forth by the ASCPA or any other governing body. And so, to be just completely correct in our references to what we're doing, we're considering it to be a compensation equity analysis, even though you may hear others refer to it as a pay equity audit. Compensation equity does not mean paying all employees equally, because of course, some positions are valued more than others. And the goal of an analysis is not to, even out everybody across the company. Although I have seen and heard of some companies who, usually in the startup world, just start out paying everybody exactly the same. And then they find out over time, like why that doesn't necessarily work or isn't fair. The goal of the analysis though, is just to find out, for a point in time or over a period of time, do disparities exist? And are they limited to certain portions of the employee population, like one office or one department? Or can they be explained by some legitimate business justification other than a protected class characteristic? So we want to get into a little bit of the data and what you might be likely to find if you start looking into the data. Holly, do you want to talk about the stark facts?
Yeah, and I think based on some of the comments that came in with our RSVPs, I think there's concern that not every employer has a different approach to setting salaries and doing these reviews. Some have been doing this formally for many years. Others do it in a more of an ad hoc way. But the backdrop to this is, in study after study, we're finding this very persistent gender wage gap in virtually every occupation. And that is a tough backdrop for employers who are now having to gather and report this data and grapple with this issue, because it's just, culturally it's been pretty persistent. So no one should be surprised if you run your analysis and you find there are wage gaps because they've been sort of independently identified for years, and they seem to be fairly persistent. So my takeaway for you is, when you get ready to prepare this chart, if you haven't already done something like this, you shouldn't be surprised if you do discover some what appear to be inequities, and there may in fact be inequities there.
Yeah, not unlikely that you'll find something. This slide, we just have a few data points that we wanted to share here before we get back into the nuts and bolts of comp equity analysis. This one's a study by McKinsey and Lean In that also shows that the gender pay gap is everywhere, even in jobs that are dominated by women. Like you'll see nurses and teachers on here, and you go to other positions, like you'll see the women managers earn 23% less than their counterparts on average. And this data is just all women. It can be much more pronounced if you're looking at it by race or ethnicity. We're not going to show that today just because we're kind of having a more general conversation, but there is a lot of really good research and data out there. The Lean In and the McKinsey websites are one of the better places to go for data on this. Some people do assume that the pay gap is explained by the fact that women are more likely to take maternity leave or seek more flexible positions. But what McKinsey found is that explanation does not account for the gap. It's a controlled study that they've done year after year, and they've found that maternity leave doesn't explain it. Neither do differences in experience. And Holly will cover next that education doesn't matter either.
Right. In fact, on this chart, you'll see that at the kind of more of your labor level, this is less than a high school diploma, we're seeing this 23% gap, but then that gap increases as you get to the advanced degrees, which is tough. I mean, most of the participants in this call are legal counsel, people operations, talent, and now you're in a position of having to evaluate, some of the top executives' roles at your firm. So part of what we're advocating in the presentation today are ways to think about really getting the buy-in from your top leadership, from your board, of the value to the operation of having an independent analysis of your positions, because these are sensitive issues and they're more sensitive at the top levels, or more likely to, and you're more likely to run into a gap at those levels than anywhere else in your business.
Okay, so we're going to talk now about, just besides the new law, why are we talking about this? Pay equity is really big news these days. There's this global discussion on race and gender with Black Lives Matter, Me Too, Time's Up over the last few years, and companies are talking a lot more about what they can do to ensure that people are being paid fairly and given equal opportunities. And then we have the pandemic. This increase in the remote workforce has raised a lot of questions about compensation equity that didn't exist prior to the pandemic and are gender and race and ethnicity neutral. Somebody that, was working in San Francisco, they moved to Sacramento, they get a pay cut. They know full well that their employee who's working from home in San Francisco is doing the same thing, makes more than them, feels unfairly compensated now. So it's bringing up this conversation in places that we've never seen it before. And there's a tremendous amount of pressure for companies to get pay equity right. So the concept of making sure that you're on the right side of the law, that part's not new, because we've had these high profile allegations of gender-based pay discrimination at major companies for years. All these headlines with, Google, Microsoft, Nike, Disney, Wall Street Journal, Goldman Sachs, everybody's been in the news at some point in the last decade with some sort of suit around this. But right now, the risk is not quite so much that one person or a class might sue us. It's bigger. It's about these business risks. It's about recruiting risks and retention risks. So want to talk for a minute here about boards and board governance, because this topic has been on the agenda of every board governance conference that I've attended in the past 12 months. And so you want to kind of think about, why is that? Where is this headed? We have right now Goldman Sachs and a few other firms saying they won't take companies public if they don't have at least one diverse board member. And now California they've passed a new law as well saying that they're going to require all public companies headquartered in California to diversify their boards racially, ethnically, and in terms of gender identity. And those companies have to have at least one board member from an underrepresented community by the end of 2021, and at least 2 or 3, depending on the board size, by the end of 2022. So what that means is all this talk of board diversity, there is going to be a shift. Now, all of these companies will likely have at least one person at that very upper echelon level who is statistically more likely to have personally experienced pay inequity at some point in their career and have a keen understanding of the impact that it has on business. So that goes hand in hand with this whole movement towards ESG. Most of you might know what ESG means, but I'm just going to do like a quick little overview if it doesn't ring a bell. ESG is something that public companies are really focused on. 25% of the Fortune 500 now have an ESG committee on their board. The E stands for environment, and that's what's been big up until these last couple of years. That's energy and carbon emissions and resource usage and waste. And that started years ago, companies measuring, their output and reporting their carbon footprint and that kind of thing. S is for social, and that includes things like emissions, resource usage, waste. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong line. Labor relations, diversity, equity, and cybersecurity, consumer trust, and just all those things that kind of remind you that you're operating in a larger, broader, diverse, and social world. So you've got E, environment, S, social. And what we've seen really this year is S has surpassed E in the last year. It's driven by COVID, it's driven by the pandemic, and so also with these social justice issues. So G is the last one. It should probably be the first. That is governance. It should go first because it basically governs all these other areas. It's the systems, the practices, the controls, the procedures that the company adopts in order to drive the strategy and comply with the law and meet all of the external stakeholder requirements. So compensation equity is where S and G meet. And so it's a really critical piece of the broader successful governance conversation that's happening right now. And you can expect to see more of it trickle down, as the public companies go, so go the private companies. So we're starting to see more and more interest in this at the private company board level as well. And the last thing I want to cover on this slide is transparency. Holly's going to talk about the legal implications of sharing compensation data, but the fact of the matter is that digital transformation, transparency is just becoming an increasingly a larger part of the conversation. We have websites now where employees can go and report their compensation data. Employees now are not subject to the laws of the past where companies could fire them for discussing pay. So there's just a lot more conversation happening at all levels around what people make, and companies are having to face the fact that even if they're not disclosing their pay data, it's exposed on some level just in the public discourse. So pay equity analysis and some level of transparency are starting to be best practices in most companies these days. And it's highly likely something that pretty much every organization is going to be expected to do continuously in the future. So that's just the business and peer pressure elements. I think now we're going to talk about the legal changes and the legal trends.
That's right. So we have these two factors kind of overlapping. One would be, again, just the overall governance of the organization and the priorities of the board, if you have one. And then there's the legal drivers, right? So we're going to talk in a little more detail about the Fair Pay Act, which of course is the backdrop to whenever you have to generate a document that potentially looks like you're not paying people equally. Your liability there is under the federal or the California Fair Pay Act. Other states are also passing similar laws. New York passed one back in 2019, and as always, California sort of leads these trends. There are laws in the UK that actually require companies to make this information public, and you can go online and you can pull up. I don't know, Erin, if you wanted to share a anecdote on that.
Sure. Yeah. So you can do it, and since we're all in front of our computers, you can even kind of do it off to the side while we're doing this presentation. If you just Google UK pay equity results, and they have a website where you can go and see the pay gap information for any company that has more than 250 employees located in the UK. So if you just think of any global company, they're likely to be on that list. And you'll see it just takes the information. It doesn't take into account the position of the person or anything. It just tells you the average male salary of employees of the company and compares it to the average female employee. So you just see like a pie chart and different graphs that just very basic information. And it comes across like, this company has very large disparities. There's just no context whatsoever about this information. Now, the interesting thing is the pay gap shrunk in the UK between 2019 and 2020, like pretty significantly. So it does seem to be working. This idea that, companies are now driven to have some awareness around their pay data and reporting it, even at just that highest level, it seems to have made a bigger difference.
Yeah. And that's clearly the public policy behind the new California requirement as well. And then there's a final legal angle on this, which has to do with salary information and pay scales. That was AB 168. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So starting with the Fair Pay Act, which has been on the books in California for a while, but then was amended more recently. There is potential liability to the business if an employee can show that when compared to employees of the opposite sex or of another race or ethnicity, they're performing substantially similar work and they're being paid less. So what the devil in the details here is what is substantially similar work. And we do have some guidance, which allows you to differentiate based on skills. So this is obviously a big one: education, ability, training required to do the job, and then effort. So physical or mental exertion, responsibility, which I think will be very helpful for those who are differentiating at the management level. How many reports do you have? What's the size of your budget? And then working conditions, which is more applicable, again, to some of our agricultural, other blue collar clients where, some types of working conditions are going to require more pay than others. They're going to be more difficult, more challenging. In the amendment, the law eliminated the the requirement that employees are that you can differentiate based on working in different locations, and that's going to have that's going to be an area of a lot of focus right now with everybody spreading out and lots of people working remotely. Of course, you can differentiate pay scales based on cost of living in different areas. That's permissible. But if you had, two offices in the Bay Area and had differences between those two, you obviously couldn't rely on that factor to justify those differences. There is, of course, you develop these bona fide factors other than sex or other than race or ethnicity that can explain these differences, but you need a process for that. What the new amendments clarified that whatever those bona fide factors are, they have to explain the entire difference. It's not enough just to check the box that there's a difference between these two employees. You have to be able to explain how that difference justifies the entire pay differential. And then, the other aspect to this law is it makes it actionable if somebody believes that you've retaliated against them for trying to enforce the law. And that brings us back to questions about communication. So as we're gathering the data, generating these reports, you'll be thinking about who has access to this information. And one of the benefits that we're going to talk about a little later is the idea that you may want to voluntarily become more transparent, and that I think will potentially reduce the likelihood of retaliation claims. Already in the state, it was under the labor code, you're not permitted to prohibit your employees from talking to each other about their salaries. And, I haven't seen one of those in a contract in a while, but for years, I would routinely come across these policies, particularly from my clients who were operating from out of state, because in other states, you can prohibit employees from talking about and sharing information about their salaries. Although there's an argument that federal law is an issue there too. But it's very clear in California that you cannot prohibit them from sharing and discussing their salaries, and that is a potential cause of action under the California Fair Pay Act. And then, of course, you're required to keep your records for at least 3 years, reflecting these the wages and earnings. Now, if you get a claim, let's see, are there additional context employers can provide besides salary, gender, ethnicity? For example, years of service, height. Yes, so in your pay data reporting form, one of the concessions in the new law is that employers can provide an area where they can add comments and notes and explanation, which I think is a good idea, because again, if you have a report that you think is not telling the whole picture, it's beneficial to you to include that information in your report. Now, one thing I'll note is the DFEH at this point, they're just collecting the information. There is no independent funding for the DFEH to start initiating equal pay claims from that office. So really your primary exposure here legally would be a claim by an employee or a former employee under the California Fair Pay Act, not an independent claim as a result of your filing this pay data form. But the pay data form will be discoverable, right? So if you're in litigation, that form will, I would expect, will be on every plaintiff's attorney's discovery checklist. So in explaining the difference, and this comes back to the question as well, you can have a system that's based on seniority. You can have a merit-based system. Now, I would caution everyone here that if you're going to differentiate pay based on merit, and some of our manufacturing employers do this routinely, you want to make sure you have a good system for that, and you're tying it back to some sort of comprehensive performance review or something that allows you to support a differentiation based on merit, and not something that's just sort of in the discretion of your manager. So think about that as you're planning for the year ahead and the years after that. If you're going to have a merit system, think about developing a more detailed, comprehensive performance review system. A system that measures production. So sales is kind of the best example there. You can, of course, pay your higher performing salespeople will earn more than your lower performing, or these other bona fide factors, which will be specific to each employer. And again, those differentials need to account for the entire wage differential. So one of the most common explanations I hear in terms of setting someone's salary is based on the prior salary. And this has been the focus of a lot of public policy discussion, because what this means, of course, is that if somebody's salary was set in a way that was discriminatory at some point early in her career, that burden or discount can follow her throughout her career if every employer is setting her new compensation based on her old compensation. So really what the law wants you to do is to look at a job, to value the cost of that job internally, externally, in the market, and then to pay your applicants based on that market determination, not based on what they made before. And the difficulty I hear from clients sometimes is, well, I've got this candidate, this candidate's terrific, and he or she, they're negotiating and they're requiring more than we put in our pay band. And I always tell my clients, you're of course entitled to increase that pay band, because that is a data point that tells you the market might be higher than you thought it was. But what that means is anyone else in those similar categories will also need to get a raise to ensure that you don't have one person who's making more than others doing the same job, particularly if you have different genders, different ethnicities. We used to talk a little bit about what if you had a mix where you had different people of different gender on each side of the ledger. And that's a possibility, but as we start to break it down by ethnicity as well, it becomes more and more likely that you're going to have legal exposure, that you're going to have somebody who's in a different category. One of these things is not like the others, is what we're worried about, and that becomes more and more likely as we add more categories, right? So an employer you can make a decision based on someone's current salary, and this is especially true for internal lateral moves or internal promotions. But again, you want to make sure that that you're testing that and making sure you can justify any differential. So in the salary prohibition is what I'll call it, is under the Labor Code. This is 432. This was passed back in 2018. So as a reminder, this is a prohibition that you cannot ask for salary information from an applicant or rely on that in setting the pay. An employee or applicant can voluntarily disclose that information, and I think that's becoming more common. And they can tell you what their expectations are. But the kicker there, and that's the last bullet point in the slide, is that you as an employer have to be able to provide salary pay scale information at the time that you list the job. So I think, in the past couple of years, most employers have done the hard work of generating that pay scale information. But it's another potential advantage to doing a more comprehensive compensation analysis. And that just gives you a really nice structure for how you're setting these pay scales, and one that you're required to provide anytime you're hiring for a position.
Right. Yeah. So telling the whole story really is what it is. It's just looking at how do you describe it, because we already talked about how compensation equity doesn't mean paying all the employees fairly. Fair pay is totally subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder. And like Holly just said, competitive pay is market-based. So it's hard to strike that balance of, not having to raise, everybody at every level when you bring in somebody new and have the new person at a higher rate. But you want to make sure that you have some sort of policy in place that meets all of these criteria and ideally has those good optics. Like the UK example we gave, people are going to draw their own conclusions based on the highest level of data that's available to them. So, like in California, there will be a page for notes, but overall, there's not going to be context to some of this information that's submitted. And so it's important to stay ahead of the story and to know what kind of data you're handing over, what it's going to look like at that top level. A lot of analysis is sometimes done at the, pay band level. If you're kind of already ahead of the game, then you've got pay bands, you have a bit of an understanding of where everybody stands. But I bet most companies have not just stepped all the way back and said, average male salary, average female salary, what does that look like? And so just in doing that, even though, yes, it doesn't really make sense, it does make sense to stay ahead of the story, because others that have that data will just look at it with broad strokes, and it gives you a chance to head off any conclusions that other people might make if you can stay ahead of understanding what they might look at with that raw data. We're just going to talk a minute here. So I have another little data point that in 2017, the Pew Research Center found that 42% of women say they've experienced gender discrimination at work, compared to 20% of men who said the same. And one of the most commonly reported forms of discrimination is earning inequality. So this is like getting to the heart of this, gets to the heart of what most of the discrimination claims are about. 25% of women said that they have earned less than a man doing the same job, while just 5% of men say they've earned less than a woman doing the same job. And so there's one more survey that shows that majority of women do not agree that they're currently paid fairly by their employer. So all of that kind of summarized, you go, when an employee feels underpaid, regardless of whether they actually are or not, they're much more likely to leave their organization. The statistic is that 60%, if they feel undercompensated, do plan to leave at some point. And when somebody plans to leave, they don't perform at their best. So compensation analysis and then communication about transparency and fairness, it's not just performative, and it's not just legal kind of check the box type of thing. It is really an investment in the business. So want to talk a little bit more about why to analyze it. We're just going to give you some information that you can either take back to your employer. You think that this kind of thing would be useful to share. We're happy to speak to people about this as well. As Holly said, it can be a sensitive topic, so we're just going to try to kind of explain why we believe that it's the right thing to do. First, it's the values. So many companies right now have established that they share certain values across the organization, but if they're not looking at the data to show that the company values align with the company's practices align with the values, you could run into issues both just reputationally and legally. So companies that care about fairness are going to want to remove that any perception and real bias and favoritism from the system. And you can't really do that unless you know what the results of those potential issues are. So you can also just, promoting a fair working environment. As we said, people are talking about it these days. It's really important to be able to match up, practice what you preach, and to be able to explain, we're not just talking about this, we're actually doing it. And here's the data. If you have no pay gap, you can brag about that. That's okay. And you can establish that fair pay is part of your employer brand. So recruiters love this, right? It gives them just one more little feather in their cap, something else that they can talk about, and one more reason why you would want to work for your company. Let's see what else. It is a logical and proven business best practice. Holly's going to talk in a minute about how it can impact an M&A deal. Has very real impact on pricing and potential risk as you look at acquiring or merging with another company. And then you can also use compensation equity analysis to respond to a specific risk. We've already talked about regulations, so I'll just talk about if there are some things that have been identified as an issue, if you've had a complaint, if there's a misconception that needs to be cleared up, if someone's brought up a concern about fair pay, you can really dive in, and with the data analysis, you can really go deep and get to the bottom of, is this an issue or is it okay? So Holly's covered most of the legal compliance aspects of this. So I'm just going to end this slide by saying that having an analysis will also help to prevent future disparities, as was found at Salesforce. We have a quote here from Mark Benioff that in 2015, Salesforce made a huge commitment to equality in general. And one thing they did is they conducted a pay equity audit, and they made the results public. And the analysis did not have good results. The data was not good. They found that they did have a statistically significant pay gap between men and women, and could not explain it by compensable factors. So they shared that information with all of their employees and committed to a $3 million investment in that first year to close the gap. And then they also made commitments to reassess it every year. And Mark Benioff, he talked about it publicly. He's actually one of the reasons why I was talking to Holly about it in the first place. I was like, I hear Mark Benioff's doing a pay equity audit, but I have some friends at the company who say, really it was just kind of an internal analysis. As an external auditor, I think, you want to make sure that things are verified and actually accurate. So, that's where we get onto this whole topic of nomenclature being really important. So what they did is actually an internal analysis, and it's worked for them. So he's a big proponent now of all companies looking at their data and showing statistically that their pay is based on compensable factors and just not along any other lines. So I mentioned the word independent. I just want to say that pay equity analysis is typically driven by the C-suite in cooperation with the HR department, but more and more, this idea is originating with the board of directors because they want to know, we talked earlier, governance, they want to know what's going on and they want to track it. It's a popular topic and that's a good thing. Having the analysis be board driven does make everything easier because you tend to get full cooperation from the human resources team, from the legal team, from the finance team, and anybody else who needs to be involved, because it's not just something that exists in one department. There may be payroll, there may be finance, and the C-suite needs to be involved as well. So you'll notice we have the word independent at the top here. I come from financial statement audit land, so independence is always top of mind for us. And like I said, many companies are doing their own internal analysis, but having it be done independently by an outside firm not only alleviates the pressure off of that HR team and the CFO to conduct the analysis, it also gives the employees and the board and the stakeholders more assurance about the accuracy and the neutrality of the data. And you'll want to think about that as you figure out what kinds of reports you want to maintain as well, because employees and recruits and recruiters are interested in this information. It just bodes well if they can see that it's not just something that's being generated internally and kind of like talked about, and it doesn't have that extra layer of authenticity placed behind it by having somebody else who's independent of the company come in to take a look. Holly, did you want to say anything about that piece as well?
I think maybe on the next slide, we talk about the how. Is that right? Yeah. So, so the idea here is, you may have some internal analysis that has already been done that everyone's kind of, feels comfortable with, but having someone else, whether it's somebody at like Erin or even outside counsel, take a look at your data can help you identify some of the questions that maybe need to be asked and that are uncomfortable to ask. But the most common one would be if you have one position ranked as not equivalent to another, and it looks like, well, they have sort of similar budgets and they have similar reports, and somebody has made a decision that they're not the same. It can be really helpful to have a third party come in and ask those questions and give you a look to make sure that you're not ignoring some of the factors that maybe should be more heavily weighted. So as Erin said, it can be a tough message to manage and a process to manage internally, and you can really often get a lot of value by having a third party who is also your ally in helping you, make sure that everybody's going to agree with your analysis, or at least an expert would be in agreement with your analysis. And sometimes there are different types of compensation that come into play that are not being fully considered, perks, things like that. It can really help to have a more thorough analysis. And then, when this first came to our attention is in the context of doing M&A work, sometimes that's the first time that some of this data is really all being generated. And now you're in a position where, if inequities are, if there appear to be inequities and you don't have backup and explanation, you've got a buyer potentially, or if you're the buyer, you're now thinking, am I inheriting a lot of legal liability? And when it comes time to set those new salaries, it gets much more complicated, right? If you're having to make those adjustments in the context of a deal. So these are things that we, that come up that are compelling reasons to get ahead of this, and especially now with this new data reporting requirement, even for those who are under 100, and I know we have some of those in this call, I think it's safe to assume that at some point that threshold number will drop, and the state may be asking for this data from smaller employers as well. Lots of good reasons to get ahead of this.
Yeah, so I know we're coming up on the hour, so I'll just move kind of quickly through this one. I wanted to focus on some of the reasons to do the analysis, but with this, I just want to focus on the point at the bottom right side. So what we haven't talked about yet is really the whole team, like any issue that you want to tackle. It's important to make sure you bring the right people into the mix. We talked about, it could be board, it could be driven by the C-suite, but bringing all of those people together to be, on the same page about what kind of analysis you want is really important. So doing the right thing first is critical. You want to understand the gap first and then bring in the experts and diversity consultants and get the numbers figured out. Get them in a format that will give those experts a meaningful starting point from which to make their recommendations and formulate your strategy. So starting by figuring out what the problem is before talking about how to solve it is important. I just want to point that out. I want to talk about the attorney's role, and Holly, you can chime in on this as well, but attorneys are often the ones encouraging analysis because it's good to just know what you're dealing with. And they should also be consulted on attorney-client privilege. And as far as the internal team goes, though, there really should be, like I said, board liaison, HR, CFO, and then shortly after that internal team is formed, you want to make sure you have the attorney, the outside counsel involved, and then the data analyst. So really important to just sit down and talk through some of these issues that are listed on the slide here with your attorney so that you can make the best decisions around how to approach the analysis when you get started.
Right. And the big factor there, of course, is your attorney-client privilege, which was developed precisely for this purpose so that employers aren't worried that, well, if I start to have discussions and brainstorm about potential inequities, that I'm going to be generating all of this documentation that could then ultimately be used against me. That's exactly why we have the attorney-client privilege, so that you can have these discussions with your counsel. All of that analysis is going to be privileged while we work through the problem. Many of you, I know, have already been involved in where we've discovered problems that we then fix. We find ways to fix it proactively, whether it's misclassification or failure to pay overtime or whatever it is. I've had tremendous success in my practice in when you approach an employee and you're there to solve a problem and getting a release. I can say I've had almost 100% success in terms of not generating claims, which of course is what everyone's worried. We're going to try to do the right thing and we're going to end up with a big, ugly lawsuit. And the good news is, in my experience, that's not a significant risk. It's solvable. So if you're in-house counsel, I know we have a lot of you on the call, you'll already know, you've hopefully already done the analysis. Are you sufficient to lend attorney-client privilege to this process? Oftentimes you're not because of your business role. So that's an advantage to bringing in outside counsel to help you through the process.
Great. Another factor you want to think about as you get started, just a list here, kind of obvious things, make sure your data is up to date. No point in getting started if we're being fed inaccurate or outdated information. There are some compensation management software programs that handle this, but it can also be costly to implement systems like that, and they tend to not be tailored to company needs. And we'll go over in a minute, just all the different types of compensation. A lot of them are not equipped to handle all of that and unique factors as well. So one of the advantages of working with data analyst type team is that we can pull in information from different systems and aggregate it and then spit out reports that actually, mean something to you. So some of the questions, the last point on this slide, some of the questions that you want to answer, defining those in the beginning are really important. You might just want to know, are we paying men and women fairly? Are we going to be looking at any issues when we have this information go to the state? You might also think, though, about more analytically, like, do you want to see more breakdowns? You could look at it by state, by division, by director, by team. You can look at how long are women sitting in the same position before moving on. Maybe they're equal, the band is fine, but actually digging down, you see, women are actually getting promoted at slower rates, or, digging into what do you want to see? It might just be this top level compliance, or you could dig deeper. You can also look at whether you have a motherhood penalty, which is that situation where women with children statistically make less than men with children or women without children. So you could look at that as well. You can look at all kinds of different factors. It's just, what do you want to get to? What kind of answers are you trying to solve? What objectives are you trying to meet? And we can give you that custom information. And you can figure out, do you want to look at that, or do you want to focus on only the top line and what the government might want to see? It's data analysis, so we can go deep, or we can just put our toe in. But the most important thing is that we get it right. This is a sample of the dashboard, just to kind of give you a picture of the end result. It can be a simple overview, like I said, or we can put together a visual representation of compensation data and tailor this report to answer specific questions and cover different areas of interest. So this is an example of a board dashboard. What it looks like, we have one for boards and we have another for HR teams. And they line up so that HR can see more details. So the idea is, if you're presenting this to the board, your HR team can actually be able to answer questions in real time, because they can drill into the data in a way that the board isn't able to. And so that they can answer questions that might come up during the conversation. It's all customizable. This is that list. We won't go through every single one of these, but this is the list of all the different forms of compensation that you'll want to consider if you're looking at fair pay. Holly, do you maybe want to comment on which pieces of this are part of the law and which ones would be included in the data that goes to the state?
Oh yeah, so it's true. Some of this information will not be required in the P data form, but would be considered if you had a claim under the Equal Pay Act. So the Equal Pay Act will include all of these categories. And so for your purposes internally, if you have differentials, you'll want to know that, and you want to be aware of it and be able to explain it. But that's not going to be captured. Most of this will not be captured in your paid data reporting. It's just salary. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why you want to think, at the beginning of doing this analysis, what's the objective? Are we looking to just kind of stay ahead of the California rules, or do we want to, are we doing part of a larger diversity initiative where we want to really look at, all the different factors and take everything into consideration? There's a lot of nuance and customization that we might want to think about doing. I can skip this slide. If it's of interest, you've got some information here about what kinds of things we would go over in an initial meeting. I think one thing we haven't talked about is privacy and data security. That's another piece that is, just kind of ingrained in the legal and CPA world. We deal already with a lot of very sensitive information, and we have experience working with legal counsel on privileged information. As part of financial statement audits, we get the full data set already of all of the payroll information for the company, because we're testing payroll in conjunction with the financial statements. So this is not, handing over your most prized and private information to an unknown, diversity consultant or benchmarking firm. This is a group of
Trusted
people that are already trusted and already used to dealing with and securing this information. So I think that's important to notice.
Great point. And I'll just say we have a couple questions, and we'll definitely get to those before we, once we get through. I just don't want people to think we're ignoring your questions, but since we're
just about done.
Yeah,
so
we
can,
through.
Just a couple more slides, and then we can just wrap it up with questions and do more. We'll stop sharing and we can just talk. So I will just say that this is the process, as I talked before. It's kind of an assurance-based audit approach, somewhat, even though there are no standards. We've taken an approach that's kind of similar to, risk analysis, design the procedures, do the report, iterate as needed, make adjustments. We can do projections. So I think it's just important to, understand what best practices would be for doing one of these analyses. We can also do it without testing all of the information. If the mandate is just, analyze whatever HR gives you, that's fine. We don't have to actually test it. I just think that it wouldn't hurt if it's one of the procedures that the board or whoever's actually asking for the analysis is interested in doing. Lastly, just some parting words. The slide just has a few things that we think it's important for you to look in for whoever you choose to work with on a compensation equity analysis. You want to make sure that you're working with somebody that has a collaborative approach, has good business sense, able to partner with legal and management teams in order to get the work done. And then 3 things I just want to leave you with. Number 1, it is now a legal requirement to have this data. So that's kind of first and foremost. Number 2, though, a lot of people are going to be trying to understand this data this year with graphs, with information and the whole bit. So it's important to know that and choose a strong advisor to work with who can help you navigate the questions that you might be asked. And then number 3, we've talked about how it's a sensitive topic that can be hard for some management teams to face. So if it's not something that's already been brought up at your company, we'd be happy to do this kind of overview, with them if you think it would help to bring attention to it in your company. But we do have an idea of where this is going. It's beyond equity and regulatory compliance. The workforce is going to expect more of this. And so it's important to stay on top of it, to form your team, because you're going to be really impacted by this. It's going to change the perception of your company into the next decade. So it's a really good idea to keep an eye on this and get started on that now.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. Yes. So a couple things. If right now the DFEH page is still under construction, but they said they're going to be opening the portal in February, and everything's reported electronically. So check back. They're still developing their guides and some of the other, I think, information that will be needed to get the report done. One of the questions is the pay data reported by individual job or job category? So this is all anonymized. Nobody's name is included. It's done by job category, and you'll remember we identified those 10 job categories that you must use. So you're going to fit your population into those definitions, and then you're breaking it down from there. Let's see, Terry has a question here about, kind of thinking around how you're going to develop your pay bands. And while I do think it's a good idea to consider the EEO pay bands as you're developing this, really Labor Code 432.3 means that your pay band should be specific to that position. So, if you're hiring an operations manager, you should have a pay band specific to that job that says, this job will be paid between, X dollars and Y dollars, and that, and that will depend in part on bona fide factors. How much experience does this person have? What other assets are they bringing, which would place them either at the higher or the lower end of that band. But I do think it's a good idea as you're developing the band to have the EEO breakdowns in the background so that hopefully your pay will fit into one of those bands as well.